Welcome back to the Electrify podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo, North America's largest EV festival, coming to a major city near you. Thanks for joining us once again here, Electrify podcast. I've known this cat for a long time. He's a proud dad and just a good all-around dude. You can check out his Instagram if you're into surfing early in the morning in Venice, California. Also joining me, Matt Teske. Basically, you're going to be the truth serum, man. You're going to really fact check the random stuff that John and I are going to talk about, especially B18s and JDM parts. Yeah, that's it, because that's your focus, right? Big Honda guy. Growing up in the ICE era, of what was our first album? Meaning, what was our first car? Right, mine was a '96 EK hatchback, and then it evolved into now I drive a Toyota Tundra. So I have not stepped into owning an EV vehicle. Matt, what do you currently drive, buddy?
Currently have a Tesla Model 3, 2018 Model 3. Yeah.
And 2018 too. Like I like, you're just loyalist. Budget. What's the restraints here?
Well, I was the guy that was, waiting in line to get the reservation in when Tesla said, we're going to have an affordable car finally. I was that guy. And, so my wife and I've had EVs for 10 years now. So we just kind of lily padded our way from, we had a Prius, and then we had a plug-in hybrid being, it was a Chevy Volt. Then we got a Spark EV. Then I got a second gen Volt. Then she got a Bolt, and then I got a Model 3, and then she now has a Model Y. So we've had this nice collection of different plug-in cars over the last decade.
And that's such a good evolution of electric vehicles, or even just prior to that, hybrid, right? Like Toyota making their stance on saying, hey, look, we've been doing this a while, guys. Get caught up as far as technology. So Matt, just establishing kind of your accreditation. Now, John, what is your accreditation outside of having 8 million bikes behind you and just a nice head of hair still? My gosh, you have such a good head of hair, Nads.
I'm hanging on for dear life. I have to wonder why I'm even here, because I count on never driven an EV and can count on one hand the amount of rides I've had in EVs, and some have been pretty spectacular. But yeah, so
mine was one.
Very little accreditation other than I don't count Uber EVs, like riding in the Model 3.
Right.
Normally, if I'm in an Uber, I'm not remembering it because of whatever I was doing prior to having to get into the Uber. So I have to wonder, like, you guys have had like Matt Farah, you've had Ryan, my friend Ryan from Rywire, Ryan Bossery. Mm-hmm. You guys have had DC Ezrihola as a guest and everything. These are the guys that are like moving that needle. The Johnny Liebermans, the Ed Lowe's, the Jonathan Wards of the world, the Ben Schaefers at Unplugged, the Matt Teskes, like, you guys are the ones that are moving the needle. I don't know why I'm here. I literally am doing this silly TV show, and I got thrown on the inevitable with
John. This is EV intervention. So thanks for joining us here. Grab a seat. I see you got a nice cup of coffee there, and your Super Street Garage coffee mug. Blatant placement. Love it. No, I think that you as a consumer and being a car guy, I think that's when I got tapped and BJ says, hey man, we want to do something different with the Electrify podcast. I said, sweet. Kind of like you. I've been in a little bit more than you, but I'm intrigued. So we kind of want to make it. I always reference Cro-Magnon lawyer. And again, we have gray hair. So I always reference that. It's like, I'm frightened and bewildered by your traveling machines. So I feel like you're Cro-Magnon EV lawyer. And we're gonna educate you and not make it so, because if you listen to BC's podcast, he was adamant about not going EV.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
right. So
were. Yeah.
So why are you so scared?
I'm not necessarily scared. I'm just blatantly ignorant about it. And for me, one of the things, and also too, thank you for having me on, because I have deep history with you, Jarod, deep history with Matt, and really deep history with BJ Burtwell too, and Peter McGilvray. I like seeing all you guys come together. Neil Chin too, let's not forget him. Seeing everybody come together for the Electrify Expo and this podcast as well, to me, is very exciting, because one thing, while I may be a Luddite and while my bikes may not be EV, they're still NADSI powered. I am very much pro looking forward. I never like to be that Al Bundy 4 touchdowns in a single game guy, like back in high school. People always go, oh, Throwback Thursday and Flashback Friday. And for me, I'm always focused on what's next. And for me, I firmly believe that EV is next. There's no way around it. It's undeniable. But I'm still trying to figure out what way that is. I'm seeing people like Travis Pastrana, Nitro Rallycross they're doing EVs. You're seeing it in Extreme E. You're seeing it in Formula E. Even like Jarod from your world, you're seeing Travis Reeder driving the electric Camaro and Formula Drift, which I want to get into that a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're at this weird crossroads where we're not quite there yet, but we are going down this path. And I've done, a couple more of these podcasts about talking about this. I'm very bullish about the fact that automobiles are going the way of the horse, traditional automobiles. You have like different electric propulsion that's coming, and then you have autonomous that's coming as well. And there's no way we're going to be able to exist in a world where we drive a car next to the iRobot car that's the R8 and iRobot, that we're never going to be able to get there, because I think there was a stat that I read, and it's a little dated, and Matt can maybe correct me on this, but Google, as they're doing their testing for their autonomous vehicle, they've had something like a couple dozen accidents, and everybody's like, uh-oh, that's not good. But all of those accidents have been the fault of the loose nut behind the wheel, a human like smashing into those cars. So for me, I'm like, they're getting it right. They're still like, oh, the nav sent me into a lake. You're still going to have those issues and everything, and they're still having problems reading everything. But once they get the infrastructure right, and once the smart highways come through, we're done for. Maybe city driving you're going to have, but I think the automobile is definitely going the way of the horse. And I will say that with certainty, the one thing that you're going to see is, back in the day, everyone owned a horse. So it was the mode of transportation. Now, little rich girls get ponies, and then they go ride the horse, and it's a status. It's an elite symbol. So I think that's going to happen with automobiles. We are seeing, like, is it Autobahn Country Club and Thermal, and you're seeing these country club racetracks and everything where people will just store their cars. It's going to be the little girl doesn't get a pony, the little girl gets a 1990 Miata, and they're like, "What's that?" And then dad's pouring some fluid into the side of the car, and they're like, "Oh my God, the wealthy get to do such extravagant things."
Well, John, look behind you. Ricky Chu is bringing in your pony right now.
Yeah, right.
We're going to bring in somebody else. And Ricky Chu is right behind you. He's brought in your pony, and you're the pretty girl. You're the belle of the ball. Also, in my mind is Bone Thugs and Harmony, Crossroads. See you at the cross. You talked about the Crossroads.
100.
How to bring that into it. And you're right. On another podcast that I have with AAA, I interviewed the director of CARB. And it was a good one. I mean, he didn't get so polarizing, but I did like his stance. And to your point, ICE is going to be more of a hobby.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like tomorrow, not saying,
No.
but, and Matt, I want to bring you and Matt, and he talked about that. And Nads, it's funny, you talk about, you've probably ridden in Tesla tube at SEMA, at the Las Vegas Convention Center. So you've ridden in a few more.
Yeah.
And then also, I remember the first time my wife and I were at SEMA show, or not, that was 99, my wife, when I met her at SEMA show. But the first time I rode an autonomous car where the dude is riding shotgun, but nobody behind the wheel, and we're in the back, and it was a Volvo. I was like, what is this? So Matt, what say you, man? I mean, we got the Nostradamus?
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
And I think Nads is on point a lot of different ways, I think. Honestly, I think the biggest difficulty, and the kind of way I describe it to folks sometimes, is it's as if we painted a painting and it's done and it's beautiful, and now we're trying to rework it for some reason. And that's, to me, the infrastructure and how it has to kind of marry to the car, like Nads was talking about. Is we already have filled in the gaps of how we move with cars, and to have it really be smart and communicate back and forth, that's, I think, very manageable on the highway. And I think we're already seeing that with, like, Tesla's Autopilot and ProPilot from Nissan and Blue Cruise from Ford. But at the same time, we're having a problem with the fact that people want to just smash that into the city sector. I'm thinking, yeah, you can geofence that a bit, like they're doing in Arizona with Google, for example, and Uber was testing there. But I think there's so many different variables that come into play. You need to have a lot of computing power to actually have that vehicle thinking like a human in all the various scenarios. And I still think we're far away from that being, something that's really widespread. But the fact that we've gotten as far as we can in the last decade is frankly phenomenal for how well we've gone. But I don't think we're going to be people also don't necessarily like giving up control. And the idea that naturally they're just going to go, yeah, sure, this thing's just going to drive me everywhere. Honestly, no. I'm sorry. If you're in Florida and a Category 5 hurricane is hitting, the last thing you want to do is pull out your phone and hail something to save your ass. Like, that's just not. I'm sorry. Like, that's just not going to happen. So, yeah.
Take me to bed or lose me forever, you big stud. Sorry, that was a quote from Top Gun. I know our age group, so I just and Nads knows this about me. I just reference dumb stuff throughout all the day.
Well, that's not dumb. That's the best stuff,
Right. And you have ironically a NASA shirt on, so I like this. And I in a previous podcast I talked about, here's Remots, right, who's doing this crazy technology. They're going to the moon in this EV supercar. The amount of trickle down knowledge, because again, Nads, you're a Honda guy, and so am I, and that's why I love it, because we still have this affinity for just wanting this mint EG, which you have, or my EK, or a dope CRX, and I love what Ryan's doing too at Rywire, talking about the swaps and being disruptive as well, because he, at the end of the day, was wearing a Seinfeld shirt with the two Hondas on that opening scene.
Yeah, that's infamous among the Honda guys.
It's so good. It's so good. But all that being said, is the application of technology. Do you like that kind of hot rod type of aspect, putting an EV in a Honda? Are you opposed to that, John, or what do you think?
No, not at all. I feel like hot rodding, going back to the dawn of hot rodding, is what helps propel this sort of technology to where you have, I want to say it was the Porsche 935 wasn't even done by Porsche at first. It was done by Kramer, was the first ones, not Kramer from Seinfeld, but Kramer from Germany. They were just an independent team that made this car that Porsche was like, oh, okay, you guys are onto something. So I think that there's some level of one-upsmanship that's going to happen between these manufacturers. And Elon, say what you will about him, like he was the guy to do it. But he notoriously does not like people messing with his tech. So he's very tight about that. So his thing is, this is the Tesla. It's like hot rodding an Apple. If you have a MacBook Pro, you're not able to do as much as you could do with a PC, but yet invariably people are finding ways around this. They're like, well, we could take these battery packs. The guys from EV West are famous for this, for doing this very early on. The guy's wife pulled up, my friend's wife pulled up with a brand new Model S. And I said, whoa. And he goes, guess how much we paid for that? And I'm like, well, that's a really weird thing to say. I'm like, I don't know, And he goes, no, he goes, I don't mean to be like that, but he goes, just take it. I go, I have no idea what a used Model S cost. $13,000 he paid for it. It had flood damage, and they brought it back. It had literally like one little corner of one little cell of the battery was damaged. They cracked it open, unbricked it, cleaned out the interior, and they had a brand new Model S for that. And seeing people do that sort of work. Another one that comes to mind is Ben Schaefer from Bulletproof Automotive, because that's how he started. Ben Schaefer was bringing in all these crazy Japanese
all the top fuel kits back in the day.
Top fuel
Yaris,
stuff,
yeah,
all the Voltex stuff and everything. And no one, like the very first time, I feel bad because I always tell this story about the very first time I met Ben. He's like, come watch us unload our first shipment. And I'm like, what? And he goes, we have a container of JDM goodness coming out. And I said, oh, okay. And he had a big unveiling. He opened up the doors and there was like a couple Option 2 video magazines and like videos. And I'm like, is this what you're doing? I'm like, screw off, Ben. And then fast forward a few years later, he's doing carbon fiber R35s and all this wild stuff. And then slowly he has this real quiet, literally quiet venture that he starts called Unplugged Performance, and I'm like, oh, what's that? And he's like, oh, we're doing Teslas. And I'm like, oh, how do you do a Tesla? He goes, we don't. We basically could do like bumpers, brakes, tire wheel, maybe suspension. But once you start to lower it, it gets out of hand. Fast forward now to today. Not today, but just last weekend, I ran into Craig Coker, who drives the Tesla Model S Plaid, the dark helmet car, which I love that. I got to give it up to Elon for like coming up with like an old school Spaceballs reference. And then Ben and the team like one-upping on that. Exactly. So their dark helmet car has run 3.2 at Buttonwillow, which is like 6 seconds off the overall record. And the car is stock. It's a stock power plant, stock batteries, everything is stock, with the exception of them weight delete, aero, brakes, suspension, everything else they could do to work around it. And Craig's even telling me too that, man, they're having to fool the computer. So they're like, please don't talk to the satellites and have Elon brick this thing while we're on the track. So they're working their way around that. So I'm definitely, it's a long way of saying I'm definitely pro like hot rodding EVs. And I think that's what's going to take us to the next level. And while we're on the topic of that, like Rivian, I think has got it right. Cause Matt can attest too. like the skateboard design is where it's going, right? So you have the batteries low in the center between the four wheels. And Rivian they did that a few years ago where they're like, oh, this is the same car. And I go, what do you mean? They go, the SUV is the same as the pickup. And I was like, oh, that's unique. It goes back to like traditional automotive manufacturing, which Jarod and I, being old school guys, we like our front engine rear wheel drives. It's what you drift with. It's what, you could do burnouts with. It's what you could do donuts with. But front engine rear wheel drive cars they don't accommodate different platforms. You could platform with a front wheel drive car because everything is compact in the front. You could extend the wheelbase, shorten the wheelbase, build something on top of that. With this skateboard design, I feel like you could do the same thing, and it opens up avenues for people like Jonathan Ward, he's definitely a Renaissance man, and Icon 4x4 and TLC. He did Toyota Land Cruisers. Then he started doing these crazy resto mod Broncos, like where Nike designers are getting involved with him. And then he's just telling you, he's like, oh, look at the sun visor little hinge that came off of a Cessna, or this one came off of an old Frigidaire from the 50s. And I'm like, what do you get? And it all somehow comes together and becomes this amazing thing. But then he started doing EV mods on some of them, and he's done some really cool old school 50s era with patina cars that have EV power plants to them. And I think that there's something there, so you can still have that soul to it. So I think that there's something there with that skateboard design where you could put that on any platform. You could put a rat rod on it. You could put an old Honda on it. You could put, whatever you want on it. The other thing for a motorsports application, and they're just starting to dig into this now, is you could power each wheel individually. So as you're powering all four wheels individually, we're talking torque vectoring. You could do all sorts of crazy stuff with that for motorsports applications. The thing that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is when you watch Craig Coker in that Tesla Model S go down the front straight at Buttonwillow. It sounds rather otherworldly because all you're hearing is the aero at work and the gravel coming up on the tires and everything. And it's really weird, that whistle. So I'm trying to find that soul. I've been to a couple Formula E races. I've seen Nitro Rallycross. I know, Jarod, you're intimately involved with those guys and everything. But I feel like there's something missing. When you amplify the sound effects, it gives you something there. But my friend Leah Pruitt is like running a 10,000 horsepower top fuel. When I go watch her, I feel that stirs my soul. To me, I don't know what there is for us as traditional ICE enthusiasts there. And I think that there's something that little element, that visceral element is lacking from. The other thing is manual transmission. I'm wearing my manual gearbox preservation society shirt today is because I'm an old school, like I know, save the manuals. It's a dying breed. It's definitely inefficient. Formula One cars shift faster. I don't care. I love that connection that I have with an automobile. It just feels very mechanical. It feels very traditional. It feels like a much more engaging drive, even though I'm not even the driver that puts the most, I could drive an automatic probably around a track faster than I could drive a manual because I'm too busy trying to double clutch and heel toe, and I'm figuring it out as I go along. But for me, I like that sensation, and EVs don't have that. But while I was at Electrify Expo in Long Beach, I met a gentleman who was doing a 911, a black 911 that was EV powered, obviously, and he had it preserved the manual gearbox, and he actually measured the torque output so that first gear you wouldn't shear off all the gears by giving 100% of the torque. I think it was Travis Reeder who famously said, like, the torque curve on his electric Camaro is basically a square. It's not even a curve. It kind of goes up, that's really good. It's not even a torque curve. It's a torque. So,
Matt, do you just want to go grab a beer real quick while Naz just takes this thing over? I mean, for not knowing much stuff and being naive. But wait, there's more. And I feel like he is Spaceballs. He's the dude's like, comb in the desert. We ain't found. Just kidding.
They can never make that movie today.
No, you cannot. No, I mean, again, just quoting a movie, not trying to get canceled by any means.
But thank God they did make it. That's because we can reference it, and one day the young people know. Everything that Naz is bringing up is fundamental. I think the big piece about it is what he's referring to, like that visceral, the five senses response to what we get out of driving a gas powered car. I mean, it is about smell. It is about sound. It is about feel. I mean, you are connected to this machine, and EVs do remove a great deal of that. If you're talking about how you physically respond to a vehicle, I think that what we're going to see balance out over time. And I think Leno probably said this the first time. He's the car collector of car collectors. He goes, look, everybody's going to be driving EVs in the future. Everybody. That's all you're going to drive. But am I going to want to take? And he started listing off various cars that he owned. Well, I want to hammer down that on Mulholland or somewhere, you bet. I'll do that on a Saturday. And so it's kind of what, getting back to what we were talking about earlier about, like, it was the pony produced, it's gonna be that 1990 Miata. It's, I think, and I believe there's space for that. There's the idea that there's this like purist element to it on one side or the other. There's going to be a balancing act. I don't think motorsports should be pure electric only. I think we should maintain having that as an element of why we enjoy motorsports. But if you are going to drive from your house to grandma's or to the store or what have you, should that and could that be electric? You bet. And is it going to save you a boatload in fuel? Oh my gosh, yes. And so those pieces are where the practical applications of, at the end of the day, we're still talking about transportation, that the change of the fuel from gas to electricity and then how that impacts how you respond to the vehicle itself is the big element that makes us human, and how we respond to those products. And I think that what we're seeing with like what Elon and the team did at Tesla over the last decade or more is they applied the other fun factors to what it could be to own a car. And it's like, okay, we know this thing is different, but now we're going to make it fun in these other ways. That was brilliant. And it's so superficial, but man, did it work. And that's where we're watching the legacy OEMs kind of catch up with that. They're thinking, okay, we know how to build cars, but software is not our prowess. We have to source these batteries from these partnerships that we don't necessarily have. And then by the time we're done building that car, again, 5-6 years ago, they would just hand it off to the public and say, well, yeah, you can go find a charging station. And the public was like, well, where, how, So they're learning in they're like building the plane as they're flying it, as they're doing this. And I think Tesla's playing chess while everybody else has been playing checkers for a while. But we got some people that are, like certainly on the OEM side, that are tuning up saying, we get it now. And we understand how we need to make a better customer experience. And that's why we're seeing brands switch over from the CCS connector to the NACS connector. Is because they're recognizing, well, yeah, it is a little bit arduous to plug something in that's that big if you're a 5'1", 100-pound woman who's like, this is unwieldy. But like Tesla's like, clunk, it's that big around, it's simple, and it's the same wherever you go. That's a great user experience. But it's not just the connector. Then it's educating people on how long you got to wait, because it's not always the same. I think that to me is one of the biggest things that still goes overlooked, is it's not just about the car. It is about how you experience it via how you use it and your lifestyle. And that lifestyle piece is all about, where do you live? Where do you park at night? How are you going to fill up? And at the end of the day, once you get past all that, it is back to what we've been talking about, which is, do I like how it looks? When I park it and lock it, do I turn around and look at it as I'm walking away? I mean, that is always going to be a piece of the car I bought is the one that I wanted. These other elements we're infusing with electrification are just a different way to understand the lifestyle of ownership. But there are some very emotional things come along with that.
Yeah, and I think you tapped into that, talking about, it always defaults to, are you going to grandma's or getting the groceries when it comes to EV? And that's what, and then you took get out of my head, Matt. Basically, yeah, they did the things where they made the car fart and you could play video games with the screen. Yeah. Those are just and the car dancing. Like, you saw those videos on that Christmas when that option, or when the update came out, you're like, that's so cool. Like, yeah. What? It doesn't
it's like a transformer.
Yeah, Autobots roll out. Like, yeah, it's like, and then the senses, and you talked about that, Nads, about Formula E or a road course compared to nitrocross, very different. And that's because the gravel machine gun exists, and it's hitting the carbon Kevlar, it's hitting the fiberglass, it's hitting other cars, right? But yeah, the road course, Randy Pope's going up Pikes Peak, not getting the rotary of Mad Mike's, Mazda MX-5, but, or the CX-6 or whatever, I'd carry the one. Randy driving that thing up the hill was it's cool, but yeah, so I don't know. Did you know this, Matt and Nads, when Vaughn did the Mach E1400, he had T-Pain produce the audio file for his vehicle?
That's fantastic.
That's which is so. And I had Vaughn on Electrify, and he talked about that. And he took, old Group B rally, took a little bit of F1, put a little Monica on his side, and then he created Mamba number 5 or Mach E rally. I'm just kidding. But he literally did have, and I think there's an opportunity there, and that goes back to making, building the plane while it's flying. And Matt, I think you have a great amount of knowledge in seeing that. How do you think they could help Nads in getting over this hurdle of the senses? Is that in the future?
I remember when Tesla first came out the Model S, I remember Saleen did some tuning work on it, and they had a vehicle or two at SEMA. And one of the first things they did was they retuned the electric motor. So when you actually were driving it, you really heard it differently. And I remember that was because the first time they went and drove it, they were kind of like, okay, it is faster than all get out. It is quick. You can feel it, but I hear nothing, and that's odd to me. So let's retune that. I think even little things like that, where you just get, I don't, I'm not subscribing to the let's put in a fake exhaust sound on an EV. Like, I don't subscribe to that. I think it's a little bit weird. But I think that you could make the tuning of the electric motor be genuinely unique in the sense that you could actually hear it wind up. I think one of the coolest videos out there for people is someone took the rear motor from a Model S and just put it up on a rack and just plugged it in with the wheels on it and just basically turned it on and got it spinning. And the noise it makes when it's not below the vehicle, to the ground, it is nuts. It sounds great. So elevate that. I think it is something. It's not the same as hearing, if you're at Winter Nationals, yeah, it's different. It's not the same thing. And I went to Formula E here in Portland back in June, and I was genuinely impressed with how it was kind of a gamification. How you could, when driving, they could sweep out and get the power up. I was like, okay, that's pretty fun. But then as they were coming by on the straight, it was one sound, basically as they were punching it, but then as they let off and it went into regen and you heard everything kind of slowing down, it sounded nuts. And again, but you have to kind of go and see and feel that. But I was at the GP here in Portland last month, different feel. It's still a different feel. Dixon goes by it, full throttle. You're like, okay, but
Yeah.
man, those Formula E cars are fast. So how do they balance that? How do they give a tuners some sense of like, hey, we're listening to you, where you can, at the end of the day, you can't fight physics. Little explosions happening, go boom. And that's going to make more noise. I mean, that's just, we're not going to see that in EVs. So I don't know how we balance that out. I mean, the blood getting pulled out of your face when you're punching it because it's 0 to 60 in less than 2 seconds. I mean, sorry, gas cars aren't going to ever get there, really. I mean, they can, but not on a street level. So it's this balancing act of what are people going to respond to most. And I think that we're still at the beginning of that conversation in a lot of ways.
Nads, does that suffice? Are you in yet? Did you buy one? Did you put your order in?
Well, I got to be honest. One of the other things too is I couldn't agree more with Matt. Like, Elon got it right. Their supercharger network is so much better than what everyone else is.
The ding goes off every time you say a fact. I don't know if it's good timing or like that. By the way, that's not our show. I don't know if it's going to be, but there's a ding that goes off where you're like, he got it right. Bing! I was like, what? Is he listening right now? He's got a blowtorch. Sorry. Go ahead. Nat, sorry.
For me, one of the things that I've noticed about Tesla, though, is no one's really talking about it. Their QDR is abysmal, which is quality, dependability, reliability. They haven't quite got that right yet. He's done everything else so well. The design, the infrastructure, he's got everything else figured out. But it's hard to be a tier one automotive supplier and to be an OEM manufacturer, I mean, this guy's gone to space and he still kind of can't figure out how to keep the door handles from rattling, So for me, one of the things that I'd like to see as I am a, Japanese JDM guy and everything. I love, sport compact, primarily Japanese, and like Honda and Toyota are my two favorite manufacturers. Also, mainly because I love the cars. I love that there's the replacement for displacement. Does anybody even say that anymore? I love that element of it. I like, when I came up, everybody had like big Mustang 5.0s and everything. And I was like, those guys kind of scare me. They look like they'd shove me in a locker. And there's some nerdy kids over there with like a 510 and an S30Z and an old Alpha and a 2002 BMW. And I'm riding my little BMX bike, which, by the way, I still have to this day, sadly. So I'm living my best 14-year-old life right now. And so
you ever seen the movie Big? That's
yeah, nice. Exactly. I that right off camera is my trampoline. So so I have I ride my little BMX bike to Van Nuys where everyone's cruising, and the V8 guy scared me. So I went with these nerdy guys. They go, cool bike, and I'm like, you're the only ones that talked to me that didn't want to beat the crap out of me. That's why I gravitated to those cars. But as I drove them more, I realized these cars are very well built. Like Hondas and Toyotas in particular are very well built, and I like that. Something that you could just keep going. For now, I'm trying. My kids right now are getting to an age right now. Also, really quick, as a fellow dad, I haven't really seen or talked to Jarod in a little while, but kudos to you on Parker, your son. Like, our kids are about the same age, and like seeing him like host now and everything. And I was at Long Beach, Formula Drift Long Beach, and like I saw a Rockstar activation or something, and somebody's like screaming and talking and everything. And I thought, oh, that's a really neat activation. Didn't think anything of it. Saw your post afterwards, said, oh, my son is I'm like, what? Second generation Deanda in the pits at FD. Love that. So,
thank you.
But
appreciate
like, that. as I, my kids want to get a car. My oldest is like, she's a little mini me, and she wants like a first gen Miata because she wants the pop up headlights and everything. I said, sweet, know how to do that. My youngest, she's 15 now. She's not quite into cars. She doesn't know much about cars, but she follows my oldest around. She somehow figures out, like, here's the car that I want. I'm like, oh, what do you want? She goes, I don't know what it is, but let me show you on my phone. And she brings up a picture on her phone, and it's a Z06 Corvette, like an old yellow Corvette. And I'm like,
She beat you up. She
Yeah.
beat you up in high school.
Daddy can buy an old Miata all day long, but I can't get one of these. And then she goes, well, okay, if I can't get that, I like this one. And it's a 1970 Chevelle SS. And I'm like, oh my God. First of all, kudos to you, young girl, because you have so much more soul and cool than your dad does, because your dad drives little tiny Hondas and you're shooting around here trying to get a Chevelle. Like, I mean, I'm like, you can't be Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused as much as I think.
All right.
Well, I'm only giving you a shotgun because I'm going inside. All right.
So, but I somehow like skewed her away from that. And I said, what about like a first generation Toyota, a Scion FRS or an 8.6 and a BRZ?
Oh, yeah.
And I show it to her and she goes, oh, I say it kind of looks like a Corvette. That puts my mind at ease, because I think that Honda and Toyota have much, even though it's a Subaru engine, sorry, Subaru fans, but that's a weak link in that car. But beyond that, I think this is a better car than an old Chevy or both old Chevys. And that's the same way I feel about Teslas right now. I would 100% get into an EV right now if they made a Honda City Turbo 2 and the turbo was all EV and they had the new era Moto Campo, that new Super Moto Campo that they just dropped.
Yeah, they just dropped that.
Go back to that, like, to me, that would be a really cool solution with that Honda QDR and everything. And even if you look at design, I feel like, no offense to Franz von Holhausen, the head designer at Tesla, but like the cars update, right? They constantly update, but the exterior doesn't update. So to me, I feel like, and I live in Southern California, much like Jarod. So man, and I'm near Venice. So like, that is like peak Tesla country, So it's like, I get sick of seeing them and it's the same old thing. But if you look at like an Audi e-tron, like that car poops all over the design of the.
Yeah, that thing's sick.
It's
like wagon
so
fusion thing.
Yes, that shooting brake thing. That's a great design. And I think that's where, and Franz, all due respect, that guy came from the OE world, but I feel like they're not updating as fast as they could for those mid-cycle refreshes and getting that look and feel that like an Audi would have or something. And that Audi also feels like a 2050 version of a mid 2000s Audi. So there's that soul and that connection to a traditional vehicle. Just like I said, if I can get a Honda City Turbo 2 that looked like it, but an A plus Ultra of it, I would be super down.
And that's that lineage, right? You talk about, sorry, Matt, you talk about that you want that Honda to have that same analog feel, but with a digital heart. You want the kind of the Techniques turntable, but with the Macintosh soul, like the Macintosh guts of it.
100%.
Right? I mean, super audiophile right there. Sorry, guys. But that Matt's like, I mean, are you an audiophile, Matt? I feel like.
Well, I mean, like when you say Macintosh, there's certain people like I love my Mac. I'm like, well, if he's saying Macintosh the right way, yeah.
I just sold my dad, my dear old dad passed, and I just sold his Macintosh amp. Ooh, and it was from the mid 80s, and I sold it for $3,500.
Hey.
I'm like, my sister's like, no one's gonna want that. I'm like, someone will want it. I would want it if I could afford to build everything else that's worth it. And the guy who bought it said, I'm building like a man cave with an audiophile setup, and I want 2 Macintosh amps, and I only had the one from the 80s. He didn't even bargain with me. He just came and shut up and take my money. So
that's some of the best product.
Yeah, that was super tangent.
That was So Matt, I mean, we said a lot of things there, but go ahead.
No, I was gonna say best product placement ever. Though is in the movie The Departed, when she gets the CD in the mail and she puts it in, and it's like boom, Macintosh. I remember seeing that in the theater, and there's a guy like in my row that went, oh.
Yeah, totally.
Like, nice. I was like, cool. Yeah. So no, getting all back on track, I guess. But back to the point that John, that you were making, and Jarod, that you keyed on, and you even said the right word. I think is like the heart of it. Like, what is the heart of it? And I finally got to a place where I will describe to people there's a 4-part secret sauce to making any electric car successful. Anything. And you could basically use an analogy of a human body. So there's the skin and the bones. And boy, do legacy OEMs do that really well. Like we just talked about it. It's like you put an e-tron side by side with a Model X, you will find people looking at the e-tron going like, oh my god, like the fit and finish on this thing is phenomenal. The materials, it's just, man, they get it. But then as you go down the pipeline, it's like, what else makes it happen? You then have the battery. The battery is the heart of the car, without a doubt. And it has to be really well then tuned with how you're using the battery alongside two other things, which is software, and then how on earth are you getting that electricity into the car? So it's those four parts. It is, the skin and bones, the battery, the software, the electricity. And if you think about it as a body, it's like, yeah, skin and bones, heart, blood, nervous system. Because if any of those components of a human body aren't functioning right, that body is toast. And the same way with an EV, it's like you can build the most beautiful physical EV. But if the battery is like, we found a battery and we shoved it in and we don't know how to precondition it on a road trip, so you're charging when you're at a fast charger is going to be meh because we didn't tune the battery to be at the right temp, so you're actually not getting the best charge. It's like, uh-oh, you didn't do that right. And what's that based on? Software. It's got to be dialed. And then when it comes to electricity, it was here's an electric car we built, go find your electricity. Whereas Tesla's like, buy our electric car. And we built in the veins. You just go find it and it's easy and simple. But then what the problem is, they build the cars in tents. It's like, well, yeah, guys, come on. So the four parts, Tesla nailed: battery, software, electricity, perfect. And then the skin and bones, they're like, we could improve. On the counter to that, legacy OEMs, we know how to build these things inside and out. We build cars better than anything else in the world. And then, what about the battery, the software, and the access to electricity? They have been figuring that out. And that, if you're shopping for any EV, you basically have that balancing act of I'm like, I'll deal with Tesla's fit and finish issues because boy, howdy, do they have the best software. The batteries are well tuned, and man, is it easy to use this thing with electricity as a fuel. That is the difference. So
I love it. I don't know how James Cameron hasn't licensed Avatar, the vehicle. I mean, what you described right there, you got a lot of muscle. They're huge people, right? I just watched Avatar. I exclusively watch Avatar movies on planes. For whatever reason, I watched Avatar on a screen this big, and it was the touchscreen one that has like the grid pattern. Like I was going international because I don't have 3.5 hours to watch a movie, except when I'm going to Japan for Avatar 1, and I just came back from Australia. I was at World Time Attack Challenge, Nads, which is an amazing. Ian Baker says, "What up, Nads?"
I know. I've been trying to get down there for years.
And then Avatar 2. But what you described there is like an avatar, right? You talked about the size of it, right? They go to the gym, the skin and bones, they're structural, they know how to do things. You talk about, what was it? So skin and bones, and then and then connectivity, their tails, they link to the dragon things that fly around. I'm telling you, the James Cameron, the Homermobile is coming, but it's called James Cameron Mobile.
And Avatar here, and here.
Sorry, we are solving EV's problems right now via all movie references.
Yeah, exactly.
Non-EV guys are solving the world's EV problems right now. Matt, take notes. This is happening.
Well, everybody in the industry is gonna be like, "What movie are they referencing? I've never even seen that movie."
Exactly. Macintosh. Wait, Apple? What? Steve Jobs had nothing to do with EV. Hey, did you know that?
These guys love Granny Smiths. It's like, so
yeah. Did you know Eva, the character in WALL-E, was designed by Apple? By comparison, Pixar designed WALL-E.
I did not know that, but you cannot unsee it now. Thinking about that.
Oh, look at that! Dude. Literally, my family went to Disneyland last night and went and drew WALL-E. That was my son's first movie, and then he says, "Did you know WALL-E is designed by Pixar and Eva was designed by Apple?" Anyways, sorry, another tangent. I love this. I'm having too much fun, and I think in a roundabout way, we really are talking about an ads. You're playing coy. I think you know more than you think, and it's what you've been exposed to, right? And that's equally me. That's Matt. That's Matt's in Portland. Pretty. And again, my previous podcast with Miss Go Electric, she talked about political agenda, and there's certain markets, and she lives in Michigan, so she's in Detroit Motor City. So she talked about political sides of it, and our boys Johnny and Ed, they, when I asked BJ, can we reference other podcasts? Inevitable, you can't deny what's out there, right? I think rising tide lifts all ships. I want to experience EV more, but we want to make it more digestible for people, especially on a podcast like this.
No, and I think so. There's an example of the last road trip that the current administration went on. It was Jennifer Granholm. She said, "We're going to show that EVs are great," and she went on a road trip, and boy, did it not go well, because there was a lot. They had vehicles driving in advance of where she was to basically get to charging stations to ensure the charging station was working and available and all this. I'm going, Okay. And again, they got outed quick. And then the problem was one of the people from her, from the group that was ahead of her actually blocked a charger so that they could pull up and plug in. And there was a family there and other people waiting. They called the police. And the police were like, oh, well, yeah, they can't be doing that. They showed up. It was a gas car that they were driving in advance. So there's all these things that I can't blame anybody for hearing like, okay, it seems like there is an agenda here and it's not being well executed in a way that it seems like it's equitable or what's going on here. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's been struggling for years inside of the EV bubble with regard to the stakeholders that are making it happen is they mean well. They all mean well. This is not some conspiracy. They are looking at it from the perspective you just mentioned, Jarod, which is we do only have one planet. And the science is in. If we keep burning fossil fuels and choking the atmosphere, there's a reason why Brooklyn flooded last week. There's a reason why a major town in Libya was destroyed by dams that broke from flooding. And so these are things that we can't deny. Now, how do we then balance that with what we do as a society within transportation, agriculture, down the list, transportation being a huge one? We're directly passionately attached to how we move quite often, whether it's a two-wheeled, one-wheeled, four-wheeled, what it might be. And if we can electrify that, that's great. But we have to be very, I think, practical and honest about how the process is looking. There are certainly people that cannot use EVs yet for various reasons. But there are 300 million people in the United States. Half of those people live in homes with garages or driveways. 150 million people could access the idea of I fill up at home every night and it saves me so much money compared to going to a gas station. And I bet that they don't drive 150 miles a day. So how do we then tell that story in a way that really can attach to people? Part of it is exposing them to the product, which is what Electrify Expo is all about. But then they also have to understand not just the vehicle, like we're talking about with the OEMs. It's not just I built the car. It is the other pieces, which is the software good? How do I access that electricity? Is it simple? Do I understand the difference between DC fast charging or not? And I think that we are getting to a place where we're seeing that the mass market is saying, we're all interested, but make it easier. And don't do some sort of PR stunt that shows us that it's not working yet. And then you get caught in the act. I think that was a really bad example of how we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves of how beautiful we're trying to paint it. Because there are still hurdles to overcome. So
yeah, Nats.
Yeah, I don't think we need to worry about any of that, Matt, to be honest. Like, you're worried about how to sell it. There is no sales pitch because it was just, I was at Faith Burrell, the head of the IAA, that just famously said we're going to reach peak oil dependency in 2030. Yeah. And like everybody's like, no. All the OPEC nations are like, no, that's not, don't cause a panic, because that's exactly what can happen. It's a finite resource. But the challenge right now that we have is that fossil fuel dependence is what's preventing solar, wind, and nuclear. And when we boil down to it, well, a lot of people will argue otherwise. And I know I'm a bit of a Luddite here. I feel like it's odd that we're saying that this is helping us, all the EV charging, because we're still running them out of coal-fired power plants. So
depending on where you live, yes.
Depending on where you live, and a problem, nuclear has such a black eye. Also, really quick, Netflix binge. I think it was on Netflix. I just watched something called The Days, which was about the few days after the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was such a crazy, sort of docudrama. That was really good. So highly recommend that one.
Love it.
It's in Japanese, unfortunately, so you have to watch with subtitles. But I think that nuclear has been given so many black eyes because it's, we're still working to figure out that technology, but we need solar, wind, and nuclear. And we also have a decentralized electrical grid. That's like, what modern nation do we have? Like, oh no, we use this. You just said, Matt, depending on where you live, it's not, we need to have it's like, there's something called the Kansas Grain Belt Express it's a wind power project. And right now the decentralized grid is what's preventing it, because as they could go all the way across, the Midwest, they get stuck because certain jurisdictions are like, no, we don't do that, or no, we don't have that, So that's a huge issue right now, is like, we need to all get on the same page because we don't have a choice.
There's some natural pushback happening because of the lack of faith in everything from politics to everything else, right? It's the why are you trying to dupe me crowd. And I agree with you. It's like no, this is just happening. Let's all get in line. But it's I don't think everybody's going to get in line super fast. There's still elements that need to happen to ease people's concerns. But everything you just brought up, it's that are geopolitical, technical challenges related to whether it's lithium deposits or everything else. Even the grid for here in North America or in the United States, it's effectively east, west, and then there's Texas, effectively. And I think one of the most unique things about what's happened with the grid is, number one, it is aged. It's beyond aged. Like, we have very big issues related to how old the grid is. That immediately turns into a talking point of, see, this can't handle it. The answer is time out. If you're plugging in an EV to a wall outlet, or even like an upgraded outlet at home, which is called levels 1 and 2, if you even go to level 2, that's no different than running your dryer. So the grid is perfectly fine at handling that. It's the idea that we need to get people to understand the fill-ups are different compared to, I need my 5-minute fill-up. It's like, no, your car's going to sit for 8 hours. You're fine. But I believe that what Tesla is proving out, I think other brands are trying to figure out how to tap into it, is that people are going to learn how to understand they can actually control their destiny when it comes to energy production. I mean, here at our home, we have 21 solar panels and 2 home batteries. And in Portland, Oregon, we're 60% off grid. That's bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
That's bonkers. I mean, I nerded out and did the math before we got the system. I'm like, we were going to be about 42% off grid. And my wife was like, fantastic, whatever makes you happy, but it turned into 60% off grid because of how efficient the batteries are. And when it comes to battery production, and once the batteries are produced, this is my favorite thing about EVs, and then my favorite thing about electrification is, even with issues related to the materials we're using for batteries, whether it's lithium ion, sodium, what have you, is we can recycle them. The moment we do get to, and this is where J.B. Straubel from Redwood Materials, the former CTO of Tesla, this is what he's building out, and there's other companies doing the same, this closed carbon loop, where once you get enough batteries in market, you can basically just start working them through the recycled system, whether that's repurposing for home energy or actually repurposing them for cars. And that's the piece that is, in my view, a very big educational hurdle, because no one knows any of that. Everybody just hears the grid is old, it runs on coal. If you're saying we're saving the planet, I just see fumes coming out. I think you're lying. And to me, that is one of the biggest educational pieces to what that sales pitch is, because there's still a lot of naysaying because people just don't know what they don't know. And that's totally fair. But that's part of why this podcast exists. It's part of why Electrify Expo exists. So,
yeah. No, and these are exact conversations. We can mess around and talk about movies, but there is only one planet. There is a big responsibility, and I think we still want to have fun doing it. Of course, like, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. But that's look at how digestible we made that. We had a little appetizer. It's all good. We're having some drinks. We're metaphorically, we had our steak. We got our meat and potatoes, but the sweetness of it is that dessert. And I don't know, Matt, if you have kids, but I got 17 and 9, and Ads has got his too. And here we are, man, and admittedly, yeah, we just bought our son a Corolla. We got rid of the 07 BMW wagon. It's from Wisconsin, dude. That thing was pretty rusted out, dude. We got underneath that thing. It's got barnacles under there, man. So we got him a Toyota Corolla 5-door. So now he thinks he's
GR.
Oh, gosh, no. Would I give my son a GR?
I'm that guy that would do that with my kids. I'm like,
no,
let's get you the fast one.
Yeah.
What's Gazoo? Shut up, you're gonna love it.
Yeah, the Gazoo. No, did not get him a GR. But all joking aside, Matt, you have such great vantage points. I really do appreciate having you on here. And again, especially for people that are fans of NADS, Super Street Garage, talking about JDM. NADS, again, you have a great wealth of knowledge just across the board. You do such a good job of getting random factoids out there, not just about movies or music, but you do love this stuff. And I think that that you have a responsibility and opportunity to both affect anybody who's a fan of yours, as well as your kids, your friends, people you hang out with, people that encounter you at SEMA show or Electrify Expo now, or wherever you're at. And Matt, what and where can people, what's a great resource as far as education outside of this podcast? Is it Chargeway, or where else?
Well, I think, part of, you mentioned, like, do I have kids? I don't have any kids, but the reason why I founded Chargeway is because of everything you just talked about. Is I want to be working on efforts that are making the future better for everybody, whether it's my own family or people I never meet, whoever. And so from an informational perspective, I think it's important for people to know how to use EVs, and that means using the new fuel. And so, yeah, downloading Chargeway, the mobile app, iOS and Android, you can choose any EV you want, plan a road trip, shows you where all the charging is, educates you on plug type and power level, makes it simple. I would say you can definitely start there with Chargeway. But also, I think there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of great people online. I think there's some really good influencers out there that are doing very good YouTube pieces around what their ownership experience is. And again, even like car clubs that are coming out, it's very reminiscent of Hot and Poor Night days, like the ruined car club from Tesla. Those guys are awesome.
My friend Drew founded that club. So
it's a bunch of newbies, but then a bunch of OGs from like the tuner world, and it's so fun watching that mix happen. And they're wildly active. There's a lot of knowledgeable folks in that group. And I think that's part of what's going to happen. Is I think what we're seeing even for Expo is Naz, as you mentioned earlier, with BJ, and even like us as a group, there are some people that were very enthusiastic about the tuner world and aftermarket and modifications and personalization to cars. We're now blending into that EV environment. And it's going to be very good to see people that understand how people respond to vehicles the way that we know and how we can help change those conversations. So aside from even experiential events like Expo, I think, frankly, there's a lot of great people to follow on YouTube. Really good guys, Tom Malogny. Tom Malogny is a really smart dude when it comes. He's very in the weeds on the engineering, but he knows about how charging works. And these are things that people just naturally want to find out about. So people like that, I think, are great people to find and follow. And hopefully we can bring more as guests onto the podcast and even get them involved with Expo too. So
absolutely. No, it's great. And Nads, I know we didn't even I mentioned a couple times, but Super Street Garage, having a lot of fun there with Motor Trend. I think you're a great asset into that world. But like I said, you just have these little factoids, these little seeds that you plant. And if it is bikes or surfing, all joking aside, you have a great diverse wealth of knowledge. So thanks, man. And anything you want to add as far as we wrap up here?
I like what you said about if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And I want to throw it back to, the Electrify Expo team. Back in the day, Neil Chin was like he had a really terrible Honda Accord. It was just, oh my God, this show car.
Florida man, dude. Sorry, just going to call it Florida man. Sorry if I'm offended. It's a joke. It's a thing.
All of a sudden he drops this R34 4-door sedan, white, like it was a Nomuken clone, green. It was so good, so well done. He was also the first guy to put gloss primer, like that preceded Nardo Gray by a decade at least. So to see Neil do that, and not a lot of people recall this, but Jarod Deanda had one of the sickest pulse chassis back in the day. And it was polarizing back in the day. But if you drop that car today, Jarod, if you had that car today, hot fire, I was like,
totally.
Oh, that's a weird take. It was like Sean Carlson's old school CRX with like the mini truck vibe.
Same painter, you know that, right?
Yeah,
it was
100%.
Cal Concepts.
Yep. I think you had VSKFs on it, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
No, it's Volks.
Oh, we got Volks on it.
They were Volks, yeah.
Volks. Oh my God. And then BJ Burtwell himself had an E36 silver with all Alpine interior. It was just nuts, So to see that, and Matt's Cobalt, we can't forget Matt's Cobalt. So all of us here and in this orbit, we were doing it with traditional ICE vehicles. So now when Jarod says, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right, I like the way all of us are continuing on, hopefully into the next generation, and seeing what we could do to make EVs. I think it was Matt Farah was on with you, Jarod, and he said, not going to lie, the Mustang Mach-E is an appliance. It is what it is, and I get that. I think it's great that people are pushing those boundaries of what could be done to prevent EVs from being appliances and winning over people like me, the old school Luddites like me, that were just like, well, it doesn't sound good. It doesn't have a manual transmission. So there are other ways that you could do the personalization, the customization, because let's face it, car guys and girls are just straight up dummies. Like, we can't leave well enough alone. It's like bought a daily, need to buy another daily sort of vibe. It's like, I'm just going to add wheels here, and I'm just going to add, and you want that bit of personalization. So if we could have that going forward, I think that the world can still be the automotive world can still be a fun, exciting space.
Oh yeah.
There's definitely an opportunity for a song moment. I believe the EVs are the future. Charge them well and let them lead the way, even if you're not behind the wheel at all. Give them a sense of pride. Thank you guys so much. Nads, find you online. Was it Nadsy Nads still? Is that
Nadsy Nads still? Yes.
Nadsy Nads. Matt, both Chargeway as well as your own handle. What is it? It's
Mr. Exit. It's my last name backwards. It's Mr. Exit, EKSET. Because someone took Mr. Teske. I don't know who the person is.
Well, thank you guys so much. And thank you for those that are listening and tuning in. Hope to see you at a round of Electrify Expo, or come to anything that we do and celebrate. So thank you so much for joining us here on Electrify Podcast. Send it. Thanks for listening to the Electrify Podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo. Be sure to catch full video episodes on YouTube at Electrify TV, and follow along on social media for daily clips and more.